Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, a whole mix of stuff. I've got a digital book haul for you. Now, I've been promising to do a digital book haul for a while. The last few book haul videos I've done, I've just focused on physical books. And in fact, my purchases in this video go back to June of this year. So I have been a bit slow in sharing these books with you. So apologies for that. There are a lot of books to go through as well. So I keep a little spreadsheet of books that come in, basically, either ones I bought myself or ones that have been sent by publishers. There's 69 digital books for me to talk to you about, so I'm not going to do all of them in this video because it will just go on forever. I'll probably do 20-ish in this video and then do another video next week and then maybe another one the week after. So let me dive in and talk through all the books I've got, or the books I want to talk about today, and I'm just going to do them in chronological order. As I've said on the channel before, I'm addicted to buying Kindle books for 99p. I check the Kindle daily deals every day. I get emails from BookBub every day with special offers. And if you're a Kindle user and you don't do that, it's definitely worth doing because you can get some real bargains. I've got loads of books that I probably would have happily paid a fiver for that I've picked up for 99p. The problem for me is that if a book is 99p, even if I only want to read it a little bit, I'll probably buy it. I remember seeing something years ago that said there are two sorts of people when it comes to book buying. There are people who buy a book because they need something to read. So, they finish the book they're reading, they haven't got anything else to read, so they buy a book. And there are people who buy books that they think they might want to read one day. I definitely fall into that latter category. And obviously the benefit of Kindle books is when you get them in deals like this, they can be super cheap, and B, they don't take up any room. So I've got fairly heaving bookshelves behind me, so I am definitely trying to limit the number of physical books I pick up at the moment, because I just haven't got enough room for them. These shelves are double stacked, so there's another row of books behind the ones you can see, and I've got probably as many books in the garage as well, shelved up in the garage. In fact, maybe more books in the garage, so I have got a lot of books. Anyway, that's enough rambling. Let me talk to you about the Kindle books I've got. So the first one then is A Book of Tongues by Gemma. So this is the first book in the Hexslinger series. I have talked about this book on the channel, so it was a buddy read I did with one of my patrons, Heidi. Neither of us enjoyed it that much. It was okay, but it wasn't fantastic. I think it was one of Gemma Files's early books. I'm really keen to read her book, Experimental Film in particular. People seem to really like that. So I do need to pick up a copy of that. But yeah, A Book of Tongues, it's kind of a Western with magical elements and lots of sex. So it was interesting, but it was a bit clumsily handled at times. After that is another one I've talked about on the channel, Garth Marenghi's Terrortome. So Garth Marenghi, if you don't know, is a fictional author who was created for a TV show called Garth Marenghi's Dark Place that was on UK TV in the early 90s. Only ran for one season, but very, very funny. Really worth checking out if you like kind of silly comedy and you like horror. So this book is effectively supposed to be 3 novellas that have been written by this fictional cheesy horror author, Garth Marenghi. It was fun. It was definitely funny at times, but I found that the joke wasn't enough to sustain it throughout the book, and it did drag for me a bit towards the end, so I wasn't a huge fan of that one. Next up, another book I've talked about on the channel, Hannibal, Stargazer, Alien Mystery Brides #1, open brackets, Intergalactic Dating Agency, close brackets, by Tasha Black. So this was one of the seemingly billions of cheap, slightly smutty romances you can get on Kindle. This one about an alien who comes to Earth. So aliens come to Earth, they look like hunky men, they fall in love with the women, seems to be the kind of point of the series. So this was okay. It was kind of fun, and it was interesting to read a book so far out of the kind of things that I normally read, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Right, we're getting now into some books I haven't read. So the first one is The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor, which I think is a kind of mix of sci-fi and horror. I've seen a few people talk about it and it sounds really, really interesting. So when I saw it cheap, I thought I would give that one a try. Next, we have a Western, The Measure of a Man, Smoke Jensen, American Legend by William W. Johnstone. So William W. Johnstone was a very prolific writer, wrote a ton of westerns and wrote horror as well. So there are quite a few books, labelled as paperbacks from hell that were by William W. Johnstone. And indeed, I talked about one of those in my weekly wrap-up video this week, The Devil's Laughter, which I read. So I think I've not read a Johnstone Western, but I'm intrigued to, because one of the things that comes over again and again in his horror books that I've read, and I've read a couple of them, is his love of guns and shooting things. So that feels like something that would work better for a writer of Westerns than a writer of horror. So keen to see what his Westerns are like. Next up, some non-fiction. So What If 2, Additional Serious Scientific Answers to Absurd Hypothetical Questions by Randall Munroe. So I've read the first of these. So Randall Munroe, if you don't know, is the guy who does the webcomic XKCD, which is very funny. He's also a scientist, and What If and this sequel are basically people send him like crazy scientific questions about like absolutely bonkers things, like, I can't even think of one now. I'm trying to think of one. Like, what if all the people in the world stood in, a very small space? What would that do to, what would that do to the world? That kind of thing. So, he comes up with, well-reasoned, thought-through, scientifically sound answers to absurd questions, basically. So the first book was very, very entertaining. So interesting to see what this one's like. Next, we have 3 books from the same series, though that series being the Albury Maturin series by Patrick O'Brien. So I'm gradually collecting these. I've read the first couple, and they're really good. So they're like naval adventures set during, I think, the Napoleonic era. I can't quite remember, but old-timey boat books, basically, about, so this couple of guys, one of whom's the ship's doctor and one of whom's the captain, and the kind of adventures they go on. But they're just beautifully written, and their friendship is beautifully handled throughout the books that I've read anyway. There's a bunch of them in the series, and I'm gradually picking them up on Kindle as they become available in deals. Next then, so we have a book called Meet Jonathan Knox by an author called Emmett McDowell. So there was a book I talked about a little while ago on the channel called 3 Aces, which had been sent to me by the publisher, which was 3 ace like crime novels from the 50s that had been republished and bound together in one edition. My favourite of those was about this character called Jonathan Knox, who's an auctioneer who gets involved in mysteries. So this is a 1950s kind of cosy mystery style of thing, quite humorous. So I looked on Kindle when I'd read the one that was in the 3 Aces collection, and found that there were a couple of other ones like super cheap. So I picked up both of them. So Meet Jonathan Knox is one, and the next one is, so I'm just have to change pages on my Kindle, on my iPad. The next one is The Estate Was Death. So looking forward to jumping into those soon. Next, a big kind of sci-fi horror novel, The Border by Robert McCammon. So Robert McCammon, author who's been going since, I think, the 70s, I'm going to say. Certainly the 80s. And I've read a fair few things by him over the years and really enjoyed them. Swan Song and A Boy's Life are probably the two that spring to mind as being particularly good. This is a more recent book of his, and it was cheap, and he seems to me to be a reliable author. I've never had a bad time with a Robert McCammon book, so interested to see what that's like. Next up is one that I think I saw on one of those BookBub emails, which looks like super cheesy but fun. It's called Cyber Attack, and it's by Tim Washburn, and it's got like a big plane on the cover. So it's one of those kind of techno thrillers that were really popular in like the 90s in particular. I do have a bit of a soft spot for, and I haven't read any of them for a while, so I thought I'd give that a try. Next, something completely different. Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I really like Taylor Jenkins Reid. She probably seems like someone who hosts a channel like this wouldn't necessarily like. But I've read, I think, 3 of her books so far. Which ones have I read? I've read Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, and I think at least one other one. And I've really enjoyed them. So whenever I see one of her books turn up in a 99p deal, and they seem to quite often, I buy it. In fact, I think there's probably another one which will be in next week's video. So yeah, looking forward to trying that. If you've not tried Tony Jenkins Reid, she writes books that are kind of like the books that were popular in kind of the 60s and 70s. So just books that follow the life of an interesting character. Often, like a famous person. So Evelyn Hugo was an actress in that book, and Daisy Jones was a singer. So often, like a famous person and the trials and tribulations of their success. So the kind of thing that people like Harold Robbins, I guess, used to write. But she does it with kind of quite a modern lens. So they're really fun. Next then, a Japanese book, Lady Joker by Kaoru Takamura. So this is a very successful Japanese crime novel. I don't know much about it, and I'm deliberately trying not to spoil the book for myself, because it's supposed to be really excellent. So yeah, a Japanese crime novel. I think it's about like a lady crime boss, but I might be wrong in that. So yeah, looking forward to jumping into that at some point. Next, December Part by Ronald Malfi. So Ronald Malfi is an author that I haven't read anything by, I don't think, but seems to be really, really well respected. I've got at least one physical book by him, and I think a couple of other ones on Kindle. So again, this was super cheap, and I will dive into it soon, hopefully. I always say that. I've got too many books to dive into all of them soon, but I'll get to it at some point. Right, I'm going to do a few more and then we'll stop for today. So next one is Gwendy's Magic Feather by Richard Chizmar. And I think this one is just by Richard. Yeah, this one's just by Richard Chizmar. So I've been reading I announced a while ago I was going to do a project where I read all the Stephen King books I haven't read. Of which there's about a dozen, I think. One of those is the third book in the Gwendy series. So the first one is Gwendy's Button Box, which was by Richard Chizmar and Stephen King. I've read that one. This is the second book in the trilogy. And then the third one, which I think is called Gwendy's Final Task, is written again by King and Chizmar. So I need to read that for my Stephen King project. So I needed to get the second book, which is just by Chizmar, so I could read that first. Hopefully that makes sense. Next one then is Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So again, I have talked about this on the channel before. This was a book that we read for my Patreon book club. So I have a Patreon. We do a book club every month where we read a book that's voted on by my patrons. So this was an interesting kind of science fiction fantasy type book. I didn't love it. I struggled to get into it a little bit, but other people in the group seem to really enjoy it. I'll tell you what, let's do two more. So next is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson, which is a new, 2023 murder mystery. One of those books there's been a bit of a buzz about, so I thought I would give it a try. Now, having said that, the last book like that was Death of a Bookseller, which I really didn't like at all. So we'll see how I get on with this one. But it looks like an entertaining light read to get to at some point. And then let's finish with the other Taylor Jenkins Reid book, which is Forever Interrupted. So I don't really know anything about this one, but hopefully I will manage to get to it before too long. So there you go, a quick run through a few of the Kindle books I bought recently. As I said, I'll probably do another one of these next week and maybe one the week after as well, just to catch up with all of my Kindle purchases. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know if there's any you think I should get to sooner rather than later. And as always, thanks very much for watching. I hope you're safe and well out there. I hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.